if you could go back to the start of your career, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self that no one else would have told you?
There are days you're not gonna like this answer. There are days my advice would be, "Don't do it." What I do now is hard. Practicing law for me was very easy, and being the executive director of a farm animal rescue, which is a subset of animal welfare in the smallest state in the country, is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
All right. Well, we're back at AI for Impact, and I have with me Wendy Taylor from, let's get this right, West Place Animal Sanctuary.
That's pretty good. West Place Animal Sanctuary.
All right. Awesome. Um, you were you were an attorney for a while, right?
As an attorney, I mean, I still am. Once an attorney, always an attorney.
Yeah. Okay.
I practiced for a very long time. Yeah.
And it was interesting that everybody has a catalyst that the owners, genuine person for a mission or a nonprofit typically has something life changing happen to themselves. And you definitely do. We'll talk about that in a bit. But it's interesting where I also want to touch on the part where you and I discussed on the previous phone call about, where you began with the nonprofit idea and then where you took it in a blue ocean strategy type of setup. And then also go through some of the challenges you have currently, but also some of the things you figured out along the way as the business owner and the director and CEO. Start with, like, explain some of the animal sanctuary, and then we'll kind of return back to the catalyst that really got you going.
Sure. In a nutshell, we rescue farm animals from neglect, abuse, and cruelty cases. We're often working with the authorities. We're in Rhode Island, and so we're on what they call the Farm Coast. I think it was dubbed the Farm Coast by Yankee Magazine, and they had a great way of defining like the area where we are. But it's a lot of farmland, a lot of backyard farms. So we try to take the animals in, put them through like a medical program, a nutritional program, whatever they need, and bring them back to a state of good health. On occasion, when we can, and an animal really does not need us anymore, we do adopt out, but I'd say 95% of our rescues end up spending the rest of their lives with us.
Wow, that's interesting because I know you had mentioned, there are a lot of other cats and dogs nonprofits and SPCA, and you decided to do something different about that, and that's where you landed with the farm animals and also birds and waterfowl. And so tell me a little bit about where, because you keep saying they're with us, like where on the coast, like how does
Okay,
that work?
so we're in Tiverton, Rhode Island. It's a small rural farm town in Rhode Island, and we are on 8 acres. And the animals, we have an exotic building, a chicken building, a duck waterfowl building, and a barn. And we also serve as a temporary kennel, dog kennel, for one of the local towns near us that does not have a kennel of their own.
Wow, you don't have any flamingos, right, or anything like that
Pretty
inside?
close. We do have peacocks, and we do have emus. So,
There
I
you
mean,
go.
they like to think that they're flamingos, I think.
With what are some of the your most favorite moments as you've gone through? Because clearly this wasn't like it's not easy, and every nonprofit leader I've spoken to, like, we have to push through a lot of barriers. And what's something that really like warms your heart every time you want to just like think about it, and that's the main thing you go to?
I think one of the stories we tell all the time is a little ditty about Jack and Diane. They are 2 they were 2 Vietnamese potbelly pigs. We received a call about them. After a very long, criminal investigation, they were seized, as part of a case, and they went over to a local SPCA who does not care for farm animals long term. I got the call to see if we could take them in, and I was told, they're elderly, they're morbidly obese, they are coming to you for hospice care only, and maybe they'll be with you for a few weeks or a few months, and we put them on that medical program and that nutritional program that I mentioned and an exercise program, and that was 7.5 years ago, and they're still with us, and they lost significant amounts of weight. At the time, they were mechanically blind. So Vietnamese potbelly pigs have like facial rolls, like
Okay.
some of those cute little dogs, and their facial fat was so much and so heavy that it was causing their eyelids to be be closed, and they didn't have the mechanical strength to open them. So for the first year they were with us, they couldn't roam independently because they couldn't see. And it wasn't until they took all the weight off that they were able to see. So
That sounds
to
like a children's book just waiting to be written, does.
it does. I mean, we did modify the lyrics of Jack and Diane by John Cougar Mellencamp a little bit, and we do sing it about the pigs when we when we have
That's
time.
cute.
That's just the perfect story about what does warm our hearts, because we're given an animal that is not supposed to live, is not supposed to make it, and we help them beat all the odds. And those pigs are now 16 years old, and they weren't supposed to live past 10. And it's just incredible, and they're still with us. I mean, one's got
Yeah, that's
arthritis and one's on acupuncture, and we do a lot to keep them warm and to keep them heated, or to keep them cool in the summer. But they're they're worth it. They showed us the resiliency of a farm animal, that does have a soul and a thought process and a personality and likes and dislikes, and now they have a whole life, and they've had a pretty good life here.
that's an interesting story because yes, like as the joke about a children's book, but really you gave this animal a new life, and it went through some challenges and then came out on the other side and is healthier and is better, and possibly has a new identity. But it's a whole nother thing that obviously, but bump, I couldn't even see the future. And it's important for people to also know that too, where in many nonprofit organizations we are asked to show impact, and whether in numbers or data and things like that. But what I'm hearing, like, there's 30% of the majority of nonprofits also are emotional, are feeling, and it come down to like doing the right thing for another living thing, another human being, another animal. And that's where I'm learning in terms of like how how relevant are you to the community? How relevant are you as West Place to, other farms that maybe have noticed they have some animals that might not make it? And how do you work with your outreach teams, and what do you do to actually spread word about West Place?
Well, when we started, which was about 20 years ago, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, TikTok, you name it. They didn't yet exist, and Facebook hadn't hit the mainstream. So it was a lot of email, word of mouth, literally posting flyers at coffee shops and libraries and gyms and bakeries and things like that to spread the word. And we started by I mean, when we started, I did not think we would still be here. I didn't think we would still be growing. This was something, you talk about, and we talked about the resiliency and the new life that Jack and Diane got here after, a life-altering event happened to them. And it was very similar to what happened to me and to why this sanctuary exists to begin with. So when it started, I certainly it was as much for me as it was for anyone or any animal. I didn't think we would get where we are. And now, of course, with YouTube and podcasts and everything else, it's a lot easier to get the word around. A lot of local businesses that support us either by financially supporting us, but even just as important, if they have a large social following and they're spreading the word about us, that's great, because that connects us to a whole new audience, and that means so
Right.
much to us.
Yeah, and I think there's a really good segue from how you take care of animals who other people may have just kind of like written off, and they're like, oh, you can take care of these pigs for a little bit, or this duck will never swim or fly, and this and that. And there's a lot of nonprofit organizations who take in humans that their entire culture has shunned because maybe they were disabled or bull-legged or in Ghana. And there's Wendy, I have spoken to over 30 other CEOs since I've talked to you. It's been incredible. It's really opened my eyes. But as the story goes, you're doing for these animals something that's absolutely impressive, and you kind of touched on it before. You're like, you said it was as much for me as it is for them. And so do you want to tell the story about like what really caused this mission to come to fruition?
I mean, I never want to tell the story, but I certainly will briefly. Um, as you mentioned, I was an attorney. I was a litigation attorney, medical malpractice, and I was on the way to see an expert one day to have a meeting, and I got a call from my secretary, who got a call from someone else, and she was just screaming that my house was on fire, and I arrived back to a 3-alarm fire. I lost pretty much everything, including all of my pets. And things, items, belongings, those can all be replaced.
Yeah.
But something you love can't. Someone, something that you love just cannot be replaced. And when that all happened, obviously, everything comes at you very, very quickly. And you've got to rebuild and recenter yourself and take stock of your life. And as I was doing that, and also just trying to get to my job every day, um a friend of mine, also an attorney, said that I should probably donate to another animal rescue to sort of balance the scales and do it in honor of the animals I lost. And to this day, almost 20 years later, I joke, yeah, I should have, because being a lawyer and having the personality that we do, well, why would I donate to an organization when I can start, not only when I can start one of my own, but when I can fill in a gap in the animal welfare landscape? And no one was handling farm animals. No one was looking out for the welfare of farm animals. So, now we go back to the very beginning of this conversation, which is that's
Yeah,
what I
that's
started, and this is what it's become. But, to your point about humans and me starting it for myself to help me as a human, when I did, I always said for many years, "This is not a human sanctuary, this is an animal sanctuary." And what I've learned over time, and what we've all learned here, is we we do this as much for humans as we do it for animals. And it
true.
started by realizing, we have a good group of senior citizens that come to volunteer, and throughout the course of the week, and they work not just as hard, they work harder than the kids do. They're dedicated, and you step back and you start to realize why. They get exercise, they get engagement, they get to interact with the animals, and they develop this symbiotic relationship where they're here to help the animals, but they realize the animals are also helping them in
Yeah.
return. And that goes for kids. Not only do we have a lot of students here, which I'd love to mention why we do, but some of them do have challenges, whether it be emotional, what have you. Some may be on the spectrum, and we love to see them come here, and they can't make eye contact, and they can't shake your hand, and they don't finish sentences, and we don't think they're going to want to be here, to want to stay. And months, years later, they are looking you in the eye, and they are speaking confidently, and
Wow.
we just watch these kids develop into wonderful human beings that they're leaving us being a very, very different person than we met when they came through the door. And we we have the ability to do all that through a workforce development educational internship program that we started. Because once I did see that human animal relationship, and I realized that it was so important, not just for the animals, but for the humans, we realized that we've had an expertise in what we do for so long now that the best way to create better animal advocates is to teach them here on site. So we started a hands-on educational program, and it's for high school and college students. And we've got a summer program and a school year program. The very first year, about 7 years ago, we started out with 5 students, and it creeped up and it creeped up, and then it hit 35 one year, and we said, "Okay, well, we're going to stop at 50." That's a lot of individual students. And we surpassed 50, and we said, "Okay, 75." In the last 12 months, individual students, not including classrooms or groups that come, we had 113 students that we taught hands-on, uh, everything from animal welfare to nutrition. We have multiple high tunnel greenhouses here where we grow food for the animals. And we've taught them how to do that, how to cultivate, how to harvest. We have some handymen that fix things. So we teach the kids how to fix, basic repairs. So it's just those activities of daily living on top of wanting to go into animal welfare that we've been really proud to be able to teach these kids. And it's not something I ever set out to do.
No, it's something where, right, you learn by doing, and then as you begin doing it, other doors open up. And then it begins to snowball at that point too. And like if you're remodeling a part of your house and you didn't realize that maybe I want to take out that wall, but you would have never thought that until you got to a certain point in the journey into the construction to say, like, let's do this differently. But that's amazing. I want to know, like, do you have veterinarians also on, like, in your donor base, or sending people to you who want to learn more about animals or farm animals? And that's important, obviously, to have vets for the farm animals, right?
Absolutely, especially during the years of COVID when a lot of the medical fields kind of backed off and how many people they had going into veterinary care, so, for example, and that is true. So yes, we're very happy to do that, and we do advertise with several colleges. And when I say advertise, it was just word of mouth. We didn't know it would turn into anything, but several local colleges have. Veterinary science programs and animal welfare programs, and they are sending their students here semester after semester, year after year, and we're hoping that they're getting a really good education with us. One of our, we talked about um, the story of Jack and Diane and how that is such an important animal story, but I also have an important human story too. That one of our interns many years ago went off to vet school, and she now sits on our board of directors. And I can go to her for veterinary advice all the time. She's always in contact with us and comes out on her days off to look at the animals when we need it, whenever she can. And so it's a great way of we gave to her, and now she's giving back to the community in her own way. And we think
Right.
that's such a
So
great
that,
outcome.
yeah, there becomes a longitudinal community of where I spoke with Ruth Farmer from Last Mile Education. She was discussing where you're helping these new students, younger students, get really good at hands-on everything to go through veterinarian school and then get on your board. And then possibly if they become someone where they could also hire the next round, the next generation of veterinarians who want to work with farm animals specifically. And then they're like, oh, I know they've gone through that program. They're going to be fantastic. Yes, we'll take them. And it just becomes this wonderful cycle, like almost like, and to that includes going from, an overweight pig to changing the economy in an area, really, and more students and getting through school and things like that. But that's amazing. It's in terms of you said like 50 to 75 to 130. What would be the next step? If you could remove something that you could actually do that bigger, do something bigger? And I know the answer because you told me when we were on the phone. There are things that are blocking you from getting bigger grants and doing larger things, and what are those?
We don't own the property on which we reside, so there are just some grants, especially federal grants, that we're just not eligible for. And there is a property next to us that is on the market for the very first time in several generations. Um, we cannot afford it as we stand now. And, I guess all I can say at this point is we're hoping because we don't even have, we're a small staff. We have over 100 volunteers and interns, but we're just a staff of 4 people. Yeah, 4 people,
Right.
7 days a week, 365 days a year. So we are open even Christmas, Thanksgiving, every holiday. So we are spread very thin. It's all we can afford. We can only afford what we can fundraise and what donors are willing to give us. So all I can say is we hope that maybe a podcast like this will reach the right person who not only has a heart for animals, but for students that get the education that we are giving them, but also just for preserving a very important historical piece of property that if that property disappears and becomes a housing development, there's just no turning back. And it's a property where General Marquis de Lafayette penned a letter during the Revolutionary War to George Washington. And there's a bedroom in one of the rooms in the house that was there where that letter happened. I mean, it really is a living piece of history. So
Yeah.
we don't even care if people care about animals. We're looking for people with a big heart that understand how important it is to preserve historical parcels before they disappear.
They could do that. We could also make sure that this gets in front of veterinary schools,
Yeah,
hospital,
absolutely.
other wealthy veterinarians who also have a network of friends who could make this happen as well. I think that'd be really important. Interesting you bring up the history because in Richmond, Virginia, where we walk, there's Civil War stuff. There are still cannons in fields. If you ride your bike out into the country far enough, there are still bastions overlooking entire meadows. It's incredible.
Wow.
And those are parks and things like that. Um, what's a common misconception about like nonprofits that you'd like to clear up for other people?
I think I have two, a more general one and a more specific one. And the more general is that so many people that we've come across think that nonprofits are just like businesses, that we're just like corporations. And we are a corporation, but we're a nonprofit corporation. We don't sell anything. We don't have a product. We can't kick it into a higher gear. If we need to make more money, we just don't have that ability. And we do, and I'm sure every nonprofit to some extent feels this. We have an employee, one of our 4 employees, her primary job is responding to emails and phone calls that come in constantly throughout every day of the week, every week of the year. And a lot of times it's people looking for help. And if we say we're full or we don't have the funding to take in, 12 cows or 5 horses at the same time,
Right.
they don't understand why because they think we have this unlimited uh, we have a blank checkbook. And I can't understand why people don't understand that nonprofits struggle. We only exist if our local community and our group of donors that support us continue to do so. And if we find new supporters and new donors and we reach a new audience, we rely on that in order to do what we do. If those donations from people who care about our mission and want to see us succeed, if they're not coming in, we don't make it. We no longer exist.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that. I think everybody thinks every nonprofit
Don't.
is government funded, federally funded, state funded, town funded. We're none of those things. And a lot of
Gotcha.
nonprofits are none of those things. And that is a big misconception.
I'd like to review, like, let's go back. We can discuss where, like, you're you have this longevity. If we have this idea that not only like the way you're taking care of the animals is very similar to how some nonprofits are taking care of human beings that do get grants, that do get funding, right? It's really not that much different. Now, you have these classes and you're helping these young some of the people who become veterinarians who do add to the economy, and there is an impact there. And you are the beginning of it, not only, and you're the conveyor belt to probably help these folks graduate, get done, do well, and get hired. And I think in that there is information that other congressmen or delegates or senators or whoever can kind of wrap their mind around. Okay, we're not just talking about Jack and Diane anymore. We're actually talking about doctors and veterinarians and the economic impact that if a veterinarian or someone goes into being a doctor and they make six figures a year, they're going to buy a house or they're going to buy another car and they're going to spend this much money in taxes over their lifetime. This is something that Ruth Farmer taught me about that too, is where, because defining the impact isn't so much of like, oh, we helped this many animals and we did this many, we saw this many students come through. And then what does that help, And I think that we're kind of scratching the surface of something important here that we can show to others to say that not only are you following a typical model of many other nonprofits that help underdeserved, underprivileged children and families, shunned children, and you can say like exiled, trafficking, all the stuff that happens in Uganda and Kenya and a lot of places, the people I talk to every single week, that I hope that we get to the right person whose ears are open and the light bulb goes on and they're just like, oh my gosh, I see it now. I see that now. And you can like go into the information that you have and say, I know this person became a veterinarian or this person became a vet and move on and on. And then the employee that's stuck on the phones and doing the emails, eventually, hopefully that could be, a better process that's more efficient so that human can go work with the animals and or work with other humans and things like that to become more efficient. But I think that, you have something so special, and with that land being there, part of the thing you were talking about is because you don't own the land, some of the grants are off limits to you also,
Yes.
right? And that's a um barrier that's you're the only person I know who has that barrier in terms of like, I don't own this thing, I can't get this grant. The grant process is already tangled enough,
Mhm.
I think. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Um, so if you had unlimited resources, what's the first problem you'd tackle in this situation? What would you do?
In our situation specifically,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we would expand, like physically expand, knowing that West Place would always have a home. Existing in perpetuity is very important, not just to the organization, but to me. Uh, Not only do we have this great educational program, but we also employ people, and they count on us for a living now. I'm not as young as I was when I started this almost 20 years ago, and at some point, I am going to look towards retirement. And you can't you can't be the founder of an organization and have it start and end or begin and die with you. That's To me, that's very selfish. That's very self-centered. And, my goal is not about this organization existing for me. It's about it existing for every other person and every other farm animal that will need it, you know, in perpetuity, whether that be a decade or a century. That's
Hmm.
that's the problem that we want to be able to tackle, is to have an endowment to know that if something happens to me tomorrow, God forbid, but that the organization can go on without me at the helm. And we haven't gotten to that point yet. And I'm okay with that right now, but it does mean 70-hour work weeks. And, I started at 6:45 this morning and we're talking at 6:30 at night. And that's a typical day. And I can't do that forever. So yeah, that would be what we would solve, would be the biggest picture of all, is making sure West Place will be around long after I'm gone.
That's a wonderful thought. I like the idea of the endowment and the legacy. Obviously, you're gonna have to mentor somebody else too. They can come in to take that place. If you could go back to the start of your career, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self that no one else would have told you?
Ooh, there are days you're not gonna like this answer. There are days my advice would be, don't do it. Just don't do it. Stay where you are, practice law. I had weekends off, I had 3 weeks paid vacation, I had a company car. Life was easy. What I did was easy. Um, what I do now, this sounds crazy when I say it to everybody. What I do now is hard. Practicing law for me was very easy, and being the executive director of a farm animal rescue, which is a subset of animal welfare in the smallest state in the country, is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
I forgot about that part that it literally
Yeah.
Rhode Island, like on the coast
Yeah.
of the smallest state.
Yes. Yeah.
You're over here like falling off into the ocean over there. That's just like, um, so what advice would you share with other nonprofit leaders working with limited resources?
To go very slowly and to scale when you're ready to scale. But don't outgrow yourself. You It's so hard to take a step backwards and it's so easy to get in over your head. And I say that not because I feel like I did. I mean, I probably did, but I was also willing to put in the 70, 80-hour work weeks to make it happen. Um, but I've seen other organizations not make it past a few years because they've just gotten. I've seen farms get too big too quickly. That's why we get some of the animals we get. So to really pace yourself and realize it's not a race to the finish line. If it was, I don't think West Place Animal Sanctuary would have become what it is, 20 years in. I think the mission would have been the mission, and we wouldn't be serving our community the way we are, the way I never thought we would. You never know where your journey is going to take you. So take it as a journey and let it unfold and let it evolve as it's just meant to be. And you'll realize what you're supposed to do with your nonprofit organization if you give it the time and you just listen and you pay attention.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice. Is
Thank you.
I spoke to another leader the other day, and I'm still learning. I think this is my 6th week in the nonprofit world, right? I'm just like
Congratulations.
gaining
Welcome.
gaining and all this stuff, and he has taken a food pantry and like tripled its ability to take care of people from like 12,000, 35,000, and all this other stuff. And we were beginning our conversation on the phone. I was like, that's great. You scaled it and you figured these things out. And he's like, no, Eric, it's not good. Oh, he's like, there's that many people that are hungry. Like, do you get it? I was like, oh yeah, now I understand. He's like, there's going to be demand for nonprofits almost all the time. That's why we do it. We have a big heart to help these people. You make a good point though, is to scale that you can, demand is going to grow in substance abuse and hunger and water shortage and, animals not being taken care of because life and things that are happening and technology and whatever. So it's important for us to know that we do have the organizational ability to scale to meet demand, but we don't want to outscale ourselves
And I
and
and I did,
burnout.
and I survived it.
Uh,
And, it's a good
Yeah,
story to tell, but, it's aged me. I lost sleep. I, didn't take care of myself. I definitely did not put myself first. Not a single day over the last 20 years. And I think that's why my advice would be the way it is to not overdo it because and I always use this saying and I always say that I don't like this saying, but it's from a movie. Everyone will know it, but it's "If you build it, they will come." And I built it, and I didn't think anyone or anything would come. And just like the person you talked to with the food bank, I think back and the thought I have is, but what did everyone do before West Place existed? We're here now, but what did you do before we were here? And this was supposed to be a hobby. This was supposed to be like a second job on the weekends. And I I quit my job almost a decade ago. I go without health insurance. I go without days off. So the demand, like you just said, for any nonprofit, whether it be human, animal, no matter what, the demand is there. You don't see it, and once the public hears about you, learns about you, there's a need, and when they know you fill that need, they come calling, they come knocking, and you get what everyone refers to as compassion fatigue. You want to help everyone, everything. You want to say yes all the time. You never want to turn anyone or anything away, and you deplete your resources, your organization's resources, but also your own personal resources. Your energy, your time, your emotional resources. And when you deplete it, you're just a shell of yourself, and you're beaten up, and it catches up with you really quickly. And that's why I was only half joking when I told you I would tell my younger self, don't do it. Because back then I lived for me, and now I live for everything else and every other, every animal that's here and every person that's here. And I don't live for me. And, I've
Yeah.
I've come to terms with that, but
I
it's
think
it's a
it's
hard
important though.
thing to do.
Compassion fatigue is a phrase I've never heard, and it makes complete sense in this subject because um, I feel it too, even with what I'm doing, because there's so many ways that I know I can help, from being a doctor to going to Amazon operations to knowing AI tools and to know how to dig in. And I love public speaking. I'll go talk to anybody, and it's like get home and just stop. Like my wife, honey, just stop. Just you are allowed to not work on a Sunday or something, right? And it's just like so that's an important piece to it. And maybe that's some of the advice also is to understand that you are the center of your universe. And you stay healthy, you can take care of the next ring of people around you, which should be your loved ones and family or for community, friends, adult animals. But if you're not healthy, you can only do so much. And that's an interesting thing we could probably talk a lot about with other nonprofits who are burnout, and it must be within the entire industry because people want to help all the time, and it's not like your 9 to 5 job, people just stop needing help at 5 o'clock.
No.
Oh, wait at 9 o'clock. You know, we have intake people at Journey House pick up the phone at midnight, going to
Same.
jails, like going to detox. We have recovering people going in an ambulance with EMS to find someone who's overdosed. Like it's it's ongoing, and that's that demand that is going to climb. And you make a good point, that uh not only do people need to understand in terms of that nonprofits run from grants and donations and gifts, whether it's time or materials and things like that. It's important for them to also share that story with another person, because the second or third degree of freedom, that person might know the leader of an entire corporation. They're like, oh my gosh, yes, we can help with that. We can buy the land. I'd love that piece of land. I didn't know it was for sale, right? That kind of thing. And in this world where people's heart is in the right places, I've seen magical things happen, and I've heard magical stories. And like your Jack and Diane and the pigs. And I hope someone writes that children's book and gives all the profits to you.
I
And
hope so too, and if
that
I
would be
had the time, I
awesome.
would write it myself.
You know, that's something we could work on. We could get some AI cartoonists to build a children's book and just start. Here we
We
go
might
with the
have something
ideas.
to talk about.
Yeah, that would be interesting, but I do also like the idea, the fact where you're bringing people in, you're teaching them in your classes, and they are going on to be able to contribute more to the community of animal welfare, whether it's as a veterinarian or as somebody else, or they start their own thing, but you're making an impact in this corner of your world, and, um, I wanna make sure more and more people see and hear about you.
I appreciate that. It's nice to hear you say that. I know when I went from practicing law to doing this, a lot of my contemporaries and my colleagues thought I was disappearing into oblivion and I was becoming inconsequential because I wasn't a lawyer and I wasn't practicing. And um, I actually have a TED talk and I talk about that, as well as the impetus for not the sanctuary itself so much as volunteering in general and giving back, and how it is so important to leave behind a legacy, and sometimes that legacy is giving of yourself, back to your community while you can, and not having our lives be so centered around us, just us or just our family, but that even just 2, 3 hours a week, to give back, will mean so much to so many people, and you don't realize how many you can touch.
Awesome. I think this went really well.
Why,
I'm gonna
thank
stop it
you.
here. It'll start